So I often hear stories about parents having a fixed mindset about their preference for having a native speaking teacher. This preference seems to stem from this belief, it's a false belief really, that somehow by exposing their child to a native speaker, they would somehow acquire the accent of a native speaker. This belief is a myth. It's completely unsupported by any research. Many parents see this as an important goal, but the idea that they could actually acquire these accents is fundamentally at odds with any respectable research on how accents are really acquired. To acquire a native level accent, the child would have to be living in a native speaking country and completely immersed in that language. This is only really possible for a very limited sort of developmental window when they're basically infants. For learners older than that age, no matter how much time they would spend studying with a native speaker, they would not be able to acquire a partial or fully native level accent, be it British, American, or any other country. So instead, what a child learner needs more in terms of pronunciation is to reduce the aspects of their own accent that interfere with clarity of speech. So rather than adding on a native level accent, the aim is actually the opposite in a way. It's to reduce the aspects of their own accent that actually get in the way of being understood. So the aim isn't to sound like a native speaker, the aim is just to be easily understood. And this is a very important distinction because the fact is most English spoken in the world occurs between non-native speakers speaking English to each other. So it's really irrelevant to their success in life, really, whether or not they actually have, an accent that sounds like a native speaker. The goal, therefore, is clarity and comprehensibility, not a sort of mimicry or imitation of a native accent. English is a global language now, and it's not the preserve of Western countries that used to dominate its use. Viewing it as a Western language ignores its broader purpose, which is to connect different cultures and countries together. So another related issue to this preference for native speaking teachers is a bias towards white teachers. So obviously, it's strange and misguided to think that a person of color isn't capable of teaching very well and enriching a child's sort of cultural knowledge of the world. Their appearance doesn't affect the quality of instruction or the educational experiences that they provide. Yet institutions still perpetuate this bias, and they often say that it's because of a preference from parents, that somehow the parents demand it. And you can see this reflected in how they market their teachers. So for example, I often see advertisements looking for European teachers, which is kind of odd when you consider that most European countries don't even speak English. It's quite obvious to those that are applying that they're saying white teachers. And I think that this highlights how the industry prioritizes the marketability of the teacher than the learner's actual needs. Institutions are selling the image of a teacher as a product rather than focusing on the sort of deeper factors such as their expertise and their ability to meet the learner's long-term learning goals. And that's clear to see in how the industry sort of markets for teachers. And I want to clarify, I am not criticizing European English-speaking teachers of English. They too often make excellent teachers. This brings me to my final and most important point, which is the criteria for deciding whether a teacher is worth investing in should obviously be based on their own merits and what they have to bring, rather than just like their nationality or appearance. I happen to know many non-native English teachers who are deeply committed to their craft and are excellent teachers that often do better than many native-speaking teachers do. So I think it's really important that parents bear this in mind. They invest years in improving their teaching methods, developing high levels of professionalism, and consistently striving for excellence. In many cases, the level of dedication far exceeds that of native speaking teachers. Unfortunately, in Vietnam, it's actually quite common to encounter native speaking teachers that completely lack any commitment to their professional growth as a teacher. Many see teaching as a short-term job that allows them the privilege of living abroad and traveling and having an experience before moving on to other pursuits, maybe their actual career. This short-term mentality can often result in a sort of lack of dedication to their craft and a real sense of entitlement in many cases. By contrast, you will find that non-native teachers have to work much harder to prove themselves, show extremely high levels of dedication, and take more of a sort of long-term mentality and invest more deeply in their student skills in a lot of cases, which benefits their students tremendously. I believe it's important for parents to recognize and appreciate this rather than basing their choice on superficial factors alone, like accent and nationality and even skin color. We should take a holistic view when looking at what qualifies an educator to teach a language, and think maybe like reevaluate our criteria somewhat and make sure that we're putting the learners first.